Suffering is made contagious by pity. Under certain circumstances, it may lead to a total sacrifice of life and living energy, a loss out of all proportion to the magnitude of the cause. The case of the death of the Nazarene. This is part 2 in our analysis of Nietzsche's work, The Antichrist. If you haven't watched part 1 yet, there is a link in the description. And if you want to be notified when other parts come out, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell button. In this part, we will go over the notion of pity and why Nietzsche thought that pity was one of the most harmful elements of Christianity. In earlier works, Nietzsche already spoke out against pity or compassion. For example, in a paragraph of The Joyful Science, Nietzsche laments how pity leads us away from our own path and our own individuality. Pity as a distraction. Indeed, the opinion of the present-day preachers of the morality of compassion goes so far as to imply that just this, and this alone, is moral, to stray away from our course to that extent and to run to the assistance of our neighbor. Nietzsche's demonization of pity or compassion is an obvious attack on Schopenhauer's philosophy, which held that compassion is the root of all morality and all that is good. In fact, he is probably directly alluding to Schopenhauer in the above passage. And it is true that for Schopenhauer, supreme goodness consists in complete compassion for other people and animals, so much so that a perfectly good person should forget his own individuality altogether. Of such a person, Schopenhauer says, he no longer makes the egotistical distinction between his person and that of others, but takes as much interest in the suffering of other individuals as in his own, and therefore is not only benevolent in the highest degree, but even ready to sacrifice his own individuality whenever such a sacrifice will save a number of other persons. Then it clearly follows that such a man, who recognizes in all beings his own inmost and true self, must also regard the infinite suffering of all suffering beings as his own, and take on himself the pain of the whole world. This is absolutely appalling to Nietzsche. In his formulation of pity, Nietzsche sees a denial of life, a resignation, a saying of no, a degeneration of man's primal instincts, the will to power. Pity, driven to its ethical conclusion, will make you part of the herd by stamping out your individuality. Pity is the primary virtue of slave morality, and it is therefore no coincidence that we find compassion, or the commandment to love thy neighbor, as the greatest ethical prescription in Christianity. One loses strength when one pities. Pity further increases and multiplies the loss of strength, which suffering in itself already brings into life. But this is not the whole story. There is another problem with pity. The reaction to pity, Nietzsche argues, is always disproportional to the cause. This makes pity extra insidious. Pity is the ultimate emotion of corruption, of degeneracy, because when we are being compassionate, we take the side of the weak and grant them a kind of power which they do not deserve. This, in turn, reflects badly on life itself. Pity thwarts the whole law of evolution, which is the law of natural selection. It preserves whatever is ripe for destruction. It fights on the side of those disinherited and condemned by life, by maintaining life in so many of the botched of all kinds. It gives life itself a gloomy and dubious aspect. Pity enables the proliferation of weakness, which quickly becomes a vicious cycle. Weakness begets weakness, as the strong are pushed out and eventually outnumbered and overpowered. We have done a more in-depth video on the dynamics of the weak versus the strong in our analysis of Nietzsche's Twilight of the Idols. Link in the description. This demonization of pity goes against our modern sensitivities. Most people today, and back in Nietzsche's time, will say that compassion and pity are good things and that this world needs more and not less compassion. And that is exactly why Nietzsche goes to great lengths to hammer this point home. Pity leads to nothingness. Pity leads to nihilism. Pity has been called the virtue, the source and foundation of all other virtues. But let us always bear in mind that this was from the standpoint of a philosophy that was nihilistic, and upon whose shield the denial of life was inscribed. Schopenhauer was right in this, that by means of pity life is denied and made worthy of denial. Pity is the technique of nihilism. Let me repeat, this depressing and contagious instinct stands against all those instincts which work for the preservation and enhancement of life. In the role of protector of the miserable, it is a prime agent in the promotion of decadence. Pity persuades to extinction. But at this point, a question arises. We can grant Nietzsche the point that Schopenhauer's philosophy leads to extinction. He even says so himself. My system, when it reaches its highest point, assumes a negative character, thus ends with a negation. It can here only speak of what is denied, given up. But what is thereby won, what is laid hold of, it is obliged to denote as nothing. But Christianity, does this religion lead to nothing as well at its highest point? Surely Christianity promises us the second coming of Christ. It promises the kingdom of God. It promises heaven, the afterlife. How is this nothing? Back to Nietzsche. Of course, one doesn't say extinction. One says the other world, or God, or the true life, or nirvana, salvation, blessedness. This innocent rhetoric, from the realm of religious ethical balderdash, appears a good deal less innocent when one reflects upon the tendency that it conceals beneath sublime words, the tendency to destroy life. In short, for Nietzsche, pity is a sickness that will destroy life. Followers of his philosophy, the so-called free spirits of the future, as he calls them, should take on the role of doctors and remove this disease from the condition of mankind. To be doctors here, to be unmerciful here, to wield the knife here, all this is our business. All this is our sort of humanity. By this sign we are philosophers. And with this call to action, Nietzsche ends the short but important analysis of pity. From here on out, we must always keep this diagnosis of Nietzsche's in the back of our mind, as Nietzsche takes a deep dive into the history and theology of Christianity, and seeks to formulate a devastating critique of the religion that has defined Western civilization for 2000 years. Thank you for watching. In part 3, we kick off with Nietzsche's treatment of the Christian priests, or theologians, as he calls them. If you want to be notified when this part comes out, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell button. If you want more Nietzsche in the meantime, you can watch our analysis of Daybreak, one of Nietzsche's earliest works, or our huge 1-hour documentary on Nietzsche's On the Genealogy of Morals. Again, thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.